Welcome to DeFi Expectations. Today we have another exciting episode where I get to bring on my friend Dejan Radic from Near Intense. They are a financial product that enables cross-chain swaps. How are you doing today, Dejan?
Doing really good. Thank you very much, Fry, for this opportunity. As we've said, I'm Dejan, working as a technical program manager at Near Intense, doing a lot of things around and being really, really honored to be part of the show.
Of course, I'm honored to have you. We'll be happy to just dive right into it. But before we get started, is there anything you'd like to share about yourself or your experience in the space?
Well, I've been in crypto industry for 8 years. At the beginning, mostly working on technical stuff, but also advancing to more managerial, I would say, responsibilities. And I'm keen on using novel technologies in different kinds of areas, spanning from like applying blockchain in different areas to AI, even to quantum computing. So those are kind of my interests and something I'm thriving for as somebody who thinks about innovation as his own vision in general.
Oh, I love that. No, I think that's what matters is when it's a passion of yours as well, not just a job title. So yeah, please take us back in terms of Near Intense to the beginning. What inspired the creation of Near Intense and how has the vision evolved between conception and Meridian 2025?
Well, inception happened roughly last year, at the beginning of last year, as an idea of a couple of people from the Near ecosystem. They evolved and basically led towards the creation of the system that at first was called Diffuse, also part of the Near ecosystem. And roughly a year ago, so at the beginning of November 2024, Near Intense was launched in its own first version, basically. At the beginning, the idea was to utilize Near ecosystem as a central point towards doing any kind of swap. But now it evolved to this, I would say, seamless concept of, I would say, cross-chain swaps in any kind of dimension with a pluggable architecture going towards like achieving high scalability, highly secure transactions. And vision evolved in different kinds of directions. But the main point that stayed is actually interoperability. So basically, we have the most simple API to use one-click swap, and basically every kind of project can utilize its own functionality in a simple way where you just do a couple of calls of our endpoints and basically execute any kind of transaction you want.
It's fascinating. And I bet with cross-chain swaps, interoperability is a really important factor, which I hope we'll get to dive into some more as well. Can you describe a bit the connection of Near Intense and the greater Near protocol? Would you define it as a core team, a subsidiary, or something like a bit more autonomous?
Well, we can say that Near Intense is a project within wider Near protocol ecosystem. And now it's basically voted as one of the most important projects connected to the ecosystem. So basically, central point still is Near, and Near in its own vision has AI agents, and basically the ability to have some kind of intersection of blockchain and crypto industry and Web3 in general with the AI or Gen AI industry in general. So that's where this interoperability and simple API come into play, because basically AI agents can utilize also this API in a simple way to execute their own transactions in a way that they intend to. So basically, you can build AI on top of Near Intense.
That's fascinating. And having it all be so intense driven, I think, is really important as well. In your words, what role does Near Intense play in the cross chain future? When I talk a lot about different chains, I try to be these days maybe not chain agnostic. I have my preferences, but I do believe that it is going to be very much a cross-chain future that we continue to live in. But why was now the right time for this project? And again, what role do you think Near Intense plays in that future?
Well, we can think about our whole industry as an interoperability layer. and as an infrastructure, basically, for executing transactions. And when we think about it, at some point, we started gaining ideas about how to create, as you said, chain abstraction on top of it. So it's not an easy work because you have a lot of differences between chains coming from, like how much security versus scalability you want to achieve, what are the parameters of doing the transaction, what kind of accounting model does it do, so on. So chain abstraction came as a concept to create some kind of generic layer on top, where somebody who doesn't know nitty gritty details about executing transactions on a single chain, he actually doesn't have to know it. So in general, we've created bridges, and then we've created different kinds of systems utilizing the bridges. And kind of we can also find parallel, I would say, terms in the TradFi as well. And this way of adapting to new circumstances is something that also TradFi itself has done, but it in much slower way with some kind of slower, decades long process, basically. While the chain abstraction that we've created right now and whole industry wide, basically it brought a lot of simplicity to the way how things are working. And near intent scaling as a way to actually simplify the operations in this area, where what we're trying to achieve is to have the more simple API, but then still enable to do any kind of transactions with a liquidity layer on the bottom of it in a way that you do it, you know, really simply and really fast. So that's basically.
Well, that's really cool. And I think that's like the big benefit of integrating all these different working components. I mean, you've got blockchain elements, you've got AI, but you're also cutting through a lot of processes that waste a lot of time, and enabling yourself to scale much quicker and really experience some true growth to your product, but beyond just like growth to product, which is beneficial to the team and the people behind Near Intense. It's also like the value you're bringing to users of Near Intense, right? And I'm excited to talk a little bit more as well, like some of the growth that you guys have experienced. Because even just looking at you on X, like I remember following you guys initially after Stellar Meridian. I think you were around 12 to 1,500 followers at that point. You've like tripled at that point. But beyond what even is noticeable on the social front, there's also been some tremendous growth in terms of the actual volume that's going through Near Intense. So I'm really excited to get into that as well. For those new to Near or Stellar, how do intense-based architectures differ from traditional DEX or decentralized exchange routing or liquidity mechanisms?
Okay, so we have two questions. Basically, first one is about some numbers, and the second one is about how we are different from like a traditional DAX. So regarding numbers, roughly existing for 1 year, we've managed to swap roughly $5 billion of value so far. And yesterday we had 119 million volume, spanning around roughly 120 assets and 25 chains. And basically, last month we had around 500K unique users using Near Intents through different distribution channels. And we've generated around $7.5 million of fees, which majority goes to our partners, basically. So that's I think that's the value we're bringing to the industry, because we are connecting distribution channels with market makers. You can bring your own front end and build it on top of Near Intents by forking our repository, or you can become a market maker or a solver that solves or finds way to execute certain transactions for the users that come through the system. So basically, we are connecting those two sides. On a third side, we also connect bridges. We are using Hotbridge, we use OmniBridge, We have our own internal bridging infrastructure as well. So basically, this is a concept where we're open bridge architecture, but it is much harder to integrate a bridge. So we can do it. And basically, you can also become a distribution channel. You can become a market maker, which are simple, but also bridge as a third aspect, which is the most complex. And in general, when talking about being a DEX, you can be a DEX, like a decentralized exchange, where the transactions coming from near intents can get settled on your AMM. And basically on GitHub, you can find even an example written in Python where you can become a solver on top of an AMM. And basically, by just plugging in a DEX or a liquidity pool, you can immediately become a market maker and put your own offers. And then if your offer is the best, user accepts it, and then the transaction happens and you get the fee. So basically, that's the incentive for them. For market makers as well, they put their own fee on top, they're collecting users, and our own internal distribution channel is basically near-intents.org. Basically, where you can come, connect your wallet, and do any kind of transaction, basically what we call anything to anything.
Excellent. And I appreciate that in-depth explanation, and also in such a simple way, because you're such a brilliant person, Dejan, and I know that you deal with so many technical elements. So to be able to explain that as well as you have is just great. It's wonderful to have that explanation. To summarize some of those numbers again, you're talking about 500,000 users. You're talking about billions in volume, millions in fees generated, the majority not even going to near intents, but to partners, market makers. I think that the biggest question I should ask is, I need to become a market maker, right? Like, why am I not market making? It seems like that's exactly what I need to do, right? So with that being said, what kind of market making infrastructure is required to create these seamless swaps? And if you can provide any insight, I guess, into what it means to be a market maker.
So basically, you're connecting to something we call the message bus, where in real time you're getting the information about all the requests coming from the distribution channels inside. So basically, I want to swap this amount of this token on this chain to this amount of this token on that chain. Can you get me the best offer? And then you as a market maker, you can work on top of DEX or on top of even centralized exchange or on top of your liquidity or using any kind of other strategies. What you have to pay attention to are price changes and latency in execution of these transactions. So basically, there are different market making strategies. Many people are using AI, and basically any kind of strategy you choose, it's your own strategy. A majority of people jump into like only doing a simple type of strategies, but basically, and you can still earn with that kind of approach. But if you want to go deeper, do a bit of data analytics, think about the ways, what are some kind of things or nitty-gritty details about how things are functioning in general, maybe focusing only on a single pair or on a couple of pairs coming from, for example, single pair or similar, then you can optimize only for that and have enough liquidity or have enough edge to actually offer the best prices only for single pair, and then you can basically execute any kind of transaction. So how do we operate is basically we open this information for every solver or market maker within our ecosystem, and then they are sending their own basically signed quotes, and basically that comes to the user, which at the end user is always right, and he's the one who chooses the best value.
I get it. Just like the customer is always right, right? That's really interesting. And with when you talk about like working with these different networks and price fulfillment and stuff like that. I'm assuming like when you talk about things that can be different, is that what you would call slippage, like the difference between a price when you initiate versus the difference in the price when it's fulfilled?
Yeah, slippage is one of the things, and basically it natively exists in decentralized systems because of the way how things are functioning. And in general, if you're working with DEX, that has its own value. But for example, you can set different kinds of orders, and then basically you can say exactly how much at the output minimum wise you would want, and there won't be slippage. But if you do the flexible option, or how we call it flex out, you can introduce slippage. And sometimes it can be a couple of percent. So basically, with flex, like you're going to get offer immediately. With exact, you might wait for a couple of hundred of milliseconds. For things which need fast execution, as always, like you're choosing more costly option. But if you're willing to wait, basically you can go and tune up the system inside of basically the API request that you're making in a way that suits your needs and your users' needs if you're a distribution channel, basically.
Interesting. I love that. So we're not just talking about intents from the perspective of the user trying to make a swap, but also the market makers are very integral to this process, is what I'm understanding.
Definitely. Market makers are behind and they get all the requests for quotes, and then they also do their own filtering. They don't answer on everything. You cannot be a yes man saying yes to every possible swap. You can be, like, I want to do only this pair and I do it perfectly. So, like, it's up to you. You can be yes man to everything, but then, like, are you going to be the best? So you need to choose your fights, actually.
Yes, you have to pick your battles, and I've never been one for being a yes man. I think you know this about me, Dejan, but I think that's an awesome explanation. So, what lessons have emerged, right, from building a system based on predictive fulfillment of user intents, especially across chains with different consensus layers?
Predictive fulfillment is such a nice way to actually explain the problems of intents in general. So, we started by thinking about chain abstraction, and you had many frameworks, you had many bridges. Now there was a concept of actually creating this intent driven architecture with distribution channels and market makers. And in general, by taking into consideration the biggest Web3 roadblocks, which comes to the problems of chain fragmentation, which are making transactions, I would say, too costly, too risky, and too slow. Because basically, if you think cross-chain, you have two transactions, one happening at the origin and one happening at the destination chain.
Mm-hmm.
And both need to pass in order for this operation to be atomic, as people from computer science background would say, basically non-divisible. It needs to happen fully, and it needs to be fast. But now you have latency of one chain and then latency of another chain. And when you add them together, it's slow. When you need to execute two transactions, you need to pay two fees. It's costly. And if first transaction passes and the second one doesn't pass, you need to do a rollback on the first one. So basically, you have risks involved, and that's why it's too risky. So we have these three aspects which we need to cover. What we have tried is to create, like a transparent way where you can come to our Explorer and see exactly the steps that we're taking. If you want more transparency, every possible transaction gets settled on near chain inside of the smart contract we call intents.near. And that's a smart contract, which at this point we're even improving with, I would say, something that's going to come out soon enabling even more, I would say, financial high-level instruments that you can execute apart from the system that we, like in general, we call request for quote or RFQ. So in general, we've created a system where everything comes to near and everything goes from near. And then if certain transactions are happening and you have amount of confirmations on one chain, we can trigger the actions on another chain, even by solvers maybe even taking a bit of risk to execute the another transaction without having a full confirmation that everything has been done immediately. And that, like when you said predictive fulfillment, actually we have a word for that. That's finality. But that's a big term in the crypto industry since everybody sees finality in different ways. And now cross-chain finality on top of everything that we know in finality creates a lot of like undefined aspects when thinking about it. But basically, we're just playing the risk game. Like we want to make everything perfect for the user while also risking our funds. Because sometimes if you want to be fast, you need to risk. Like driving a car. If you're driving fastly, you're risking. And sometimes
Right.
you need to take into consideration that some kind of issues might happen.
Oh, of course, especially in situations where you're trying to be fast, such as, you're swapping to one asset to the next, like because you're trying to get some gains before something you propose is going to drop in value, or it could be a very volatile period where you have a lot of buying and selling happening at the same time. And I get what you mean about predictive fulfillment being a much nicer way to wrap up the process, because when we talk about finality, it's a bit scary. I mean, I've been dealing with bridges myself for quite some time. I recently got a MetaMask card, and you have to bridge like USDC to Linea so that you can use the card, right? And I hadn't done bridging in quite some time, but just that period of time that it takes for you to know that this money you've sent to your card has actually bridged, even if you trust the systems in place to do this, right? It's still very scary while you're waiting for like a $3,000 transaction to clear. And maybe last time you did it, it took like a minute or 30 seconds, right? But this time it's taking over half an hour. You start to sweat a bit, right? And that's where, like, I love that you mentioned Explorer, because I think that's kind of like your way of verifying to users that, hey, this is happening, this is what stage is that. Am I understanding correctly? Because it seems like that would like clear up a lot of like fear people might have about using the product, is being able to see what's happening.
Basically, that's the reason why we created it. It's on the URL explorer.near-intents.org. And when you open it, you'll see all the metrics and the newest transactions. And if you click on a single one, you'll even see the information about the origin and destination chains. You'll see the information about from which distribution channel it came, and we're adding more information about the fees happening in the recent 2 weeks, in the last 2 weeks. So basically, we're trying to give more information to the users by using the Explorer, and in general, this is something where we value transparency. Because apart from having everything fully written on chain in intents.near smart contract, you can also see it in the Explorer with additional information. So basically, that is the level of transparency every decentralized, or I would say crypto product in any kind of way has to value.
Oh, absolutely. No, it definitely. It just giving that transparency, not just what people can see on chain, but like translating that information in a visual way that users who may be new to this can understand, like, I think is incredibly valuable. Coming back to Meridian, where you and I met, you had been giving a presentation on near intents to the greater Stellar community. What would you say has changed since Meridian? Things such as your number of users, developer interest, partner integrations. Like, can you just tell me a little bit about how near intents has evolved since that period?
So it all started roughly 5 months ago when we started talking to Stellar, and it came to the point of integrating Stellar and having XLM inside of a near intense, which was run roughly on 17th of August this year. And Meridian was happening roughly a month after. So at that point, we had a couple of grand of swapped XLM, and now we have roughly 300 to 400K swapped on a daily level, where I think we had even 700K being the top swap of the XLM. So we are representing Stellar in the DeFi world through this kind of functionality with the cross-chain swaps. And basically, since Meridian, when we met, it has raised significantly. Our total volumes, I think, quadrupled, even more, because around Stellar, we had 10 to 15 to 20 million per day of total swaps. Now we're going over 100 million every day. And basically, this volume increase and also the amount of swaps increase is something that we're feeling, from different kinds of angles. And collaboration with Stellar has been really successful, and we are seeing, I would say, more and more interested parties from the Stellar ecosystem reaching us out and doing the integrations.
That's fascinating. No, that's tremendous growth. I mean, the volume you guys are doing, like the number of users, just everything. With that being said, how would you say that the near ecosystem has shown signs of maturity with things like in how it collaborates across chains, especially with Stellar or EVM compatible chains like Ethereum?
Well, at the beginning, of course, we tried on bringing the blue chips and functionality basically of cross-chain swaps to unknown chains. And then we expanded more and more. Now we have a pipeline of chains coming out, and soon also we didn't cover even all the blue chip ones, and we can say a couple of them are expected in the next month, definitely till Christmas. So our plan is to integrate as much as we can. The complexity or the inherent complexity of the integration of a new chain is not just technical, but it's also like a big business development momentum that has to be run in a proper way. And it's not that easy to integrate a new ecosystem in general. So basically, for example, I would like to say that we have a lot of BDs internally and also within the holistic near protocol, near foundation infrastructure, where they're really fighting and trying to allocate as much as possibilities as possible to near intents and basically to cover all the important chains ecosystems inside, so that it's done from different angles, from marketing standpoint, from technical standpoint, from business standpoint, and to cover it in a way where everything is done perfectly. So that's one of those, I would say, management operation levels questions and aspects that are being covered in general, which are usually not visible publicly, but has a lot of steps and a lot of processes until we announce something and say it's here, it's live. A lot of preparation has to happen, and that also happened with Stellar. It lasted 2 months.
Absolutely. And you've talked a lot about numbers as well, but are there any specific like use cases or integrations and maybe some specific numbers from those cases that like reflect some growth since the conception of Near Intents?
Well, we can see that our integration with Infinex at first and then SwapKit at second basically has proven to be one of the most successful partnerships. they have generated a lot of, I would say, volume within near intents, and basically we've gained a lot of traction there, and a lot of, I would say, operations internally are oriented towards supporting all the distribution channels that we are having, also including the market makers as well. Right now, in general, numbers-wise, we can say that majority of our fees, as said, being generated are going to distribution channels. And then by using one-click swap, you can also, if there is a, I would say, a structure of people building this distribution channel, and they have like a pro rata distribution of the value. For example, somebody has 40%, somebody 60%. In the request you're sending, you can say that fees go in this distribution basically to different parties involved. So that's called app fees, and you can utilize it inside of one-click swap. So if you're a distribution channel and you don't know how to sort out this fee distribution moment, you can do it really simply. So every time anything you want on one-click swap level, it's pretty flexible, but you need to know the details. And sometimes, if you're not sure, you can go to Near Intent's Telegram group. You can go to dev support, and your question would be answered. It's pretty live every day there, and even by searching for some of the questions you have, you can get more information. And also we are integrating more and more automation with Telegram bots there, so you can also have a chatbot experience soon where you can get some things answered in a seamless and simple way.
And that'll make things easier for you, right? Because honestly, like that's one of the things that I think is really great about decentralized finance, and also specifically Near Intents. You guys do it right. I mean, you're in the support. It's not just my inside line to you that I can get questions answered like these. Like you're tackling questions like this every day in the support room, and you've got a whole team behind you. And the fact that you guys are integrating more features such as like a chat bot really just kind of shows that you're thinking more about scalability, because I don't think it's really about like not being there for the users. I think it's about the fact that you guys are growing so fast, you know what I mean? And you have to be able to field all these questions and do so in a very effective way. But I do love that you guys have been at the forefront of just trying to make that connection with the individual learning to use this application. I think that's really cool.
Definitely. So having a support operations run at scale is not that easy in general. There are a couple of people also working over the weekend who are focusing on bringing these things up. And since it's a so complex system right now, basically every time you get your question answered at the Near Intents group, for example, in the Telegram, you're not getting an answer from somebody who is new in there. You're getting it from the core engineers who know the details. And now scaling this up was challenging, but now basically if you don't have your question answered immediately, that just means we are cluttered up with the amount of requests coming from different channels. For example, even emails coming through Telegram, Twitter or X, different kinds of Slack groups and so on. So we have a lot of channels where we are supporting different engineers working and using Near Intents on a daily level.
No, I love it, and it perfectly makes sense that like that's got to be a great challenge, which kind of leads to my next question. What would you say has been the hardest part of building Near Intents? Because we've talked about some difficult components to this, cross-chain swaps, different consensus mechanisms, so forth. But would you say it's been like infrastructure, incentives, trust, or something else?
Infrastructure, incentives, trust, basically all of them mixed. I would say I wouldn't even say mixed, like intermingled would be maybe the best explainer.
One
Um,
component affects another, so you have to think about them holistically, I think is what you're saying.
exactly. And then you have this avalanche effect, not an avalanche like a chain, but avalanches event happening of, like one problem messing things with another, and like having things done in a proper way. So I would say in general, always when talking about crypto, like you have this blockchain trilemma where if you want to be decentralized, you can be either secure or scalable. So pick two out of those three. So if you're not decentralized, you can have security of transactions, but you can then still also have scalability. But then if you want to do things in the decentralized way, you're tuning up between security and scalability in general. Now, when we're talking about it, at the beginning, we wanted to go fully decentralized, which made things harder on scalability side because we wanted to be more secure. So we've given up a bit of decentralization and a bit of security to enhance the scalability. And when you build all of this on some kind of, I would say, conceptual level, then you come to the point where some of the things you think are inherently scalable, they're not.
Mm.
It gets boiled down to like generating a private key. If you do it once, it's easy. It takes, like if you want a post quantum key generator, it can take more than few seconds. But if you do it in a regular way, using only like simple random numbers, it takes time. And for example, this latency adds up. And then if you want to do it in a way where with MPC, like multi-party computation or any kind of other functionality related to decentralizing this process, it adds up more. So, you need to be aware of these inherent technological trade-offs that exist there. And secondly, if you're integrating so many chains and assets, you need to integrate a lot of third-party providers. And sometimes they fail, not because they are the culprits of everything, but because like things happen. For example, Polygon had problems 2 months ago, roughly, and basically everything stopped, and that you cannot execute Polygon transactions, and nobody could do it. Now we've seen the problems that happened in Google and in Amazon roughly a few weeks ago. We are also seeing the problems on the security side, like in general, cybersecurity aspect, where 3 days ago, basically, we had a full-scale cybersecurity attack being executed only by AI. So now, like, if we want to be secure, we need to do preemptive security. We need to think up front. We need to prepare for all the attack vectors. If we want to be scalable, we should think about the trade-offs and build the system in a way where every possible operation has to be efficient and fast as well. And at the end, crypto economically, we can take risks, and then those risks would pay out. But then sometimes you just need to take the expense of being fast as well. So all of these things are not visible at first, but basically any kind of engineer who is into this would understand what this means. And that's not just our challenge. That's a challenge of any kind of scalable product in our industry.
I appreciate you sharing that because we had a long discussion about this actually at Meridian. And I think we were talking about it in more simple terms because I've worked in OPSEC basically my whole life, going back to my time in the US Air Force where I was involved in network infrastructure and, security plus and tunneling protocols, top secret clearance, all that fun stuff. But we were just having a discussion specifically about security versus privacy. I believe is like the two categories we kind of talked about, and how basically to try to achieve one, oftentimes we make compromises in the other. And what I appreciate that you shared there is all the different components that are relevant to near intents and how they affect this greater infrastructure of what you're building, and why it takes a skilled developer such as yourself and the team that's behind you with near intents to actually put something meaningful like this together, and also still usable by the end user, and also being secure and achieving all these things that we want without compromising decentralization. Right? It's a tough game to play, and I think it's really remarkable the way you guys are playing it. Which kind of leads to my next question with regards to kind of like the team, and just, is there anything else you want to share? I mean, that was very comprehensive, but anything else you want to share in terms of how your team thinks about risk and centralization when it comes to fulfilling user intents?
Well, basically, we think from the standpoint of being transparent and open how things are functioning, having the review of the trade-offs, and thinking about the ways how we utilize the inherent decentralization of near chain itself in a way where near intents actually does everything settlement-wise inside of intents.near smart contract. And that is the most important aspect which we are trying to achieve. And roughly, as we say, you mentioned team, there are 13 internal teams inside of near intents, and basically every team is let's say horizontal, working on their own part of the work. And right now this is, I would say, medium-sized company, let's call it that way, with a lot of people dealing with different kinds of aspects, from ops to business development to development and so on. So I would also like to congratulate all the people in the team, my colleagues, including BDs, marketing, product people, developers and engineers, different aspects, people working on call during shifts, people thinking about the novel things, doing R&D, managers. They're all part of the system to bring near intents to a level of what it is right now. So it took a lot of time, a lot of work, and with the right vision installed by the Near Foundation and Alex Shevchenko, the CEO, basically it came out, and right now we're seeing, I would say, the results.
That's fascinating. Yeah. And you know, just the numbers that you gave, it's very clear you guys are seeing the results, the fact that your product has been consistently delivering, that you're working with this large and diverse team and doing so successfully, with everyone contributing their part to manage this protocol that has to be so scalable, and that's managing, you know, users, over 500,000 users right now. I think that just goes to show like the level of strength of your team. What could other ecosystems like Stellar learn from Near's approach to solving liquidity and user experience gaps?
Well, in the beginning, when we started working about these aspects, basically we were focusing on, I would say, having some kind of internal market making infrastructure where we've provided for our own liquidity. Opening up more and having people actually coming in and doing market making, it took a while. For example, you're running an L1 or L2 chain and you want to bring miners or validators, and they are either risking their own resources or financial ones or energy ones or infrastructure ones, any kind of risk wise. Basically, they need to be aware about what they are giving and what they are getting. So any kind of ecosystem right now has those questions. And usually it boils down to the no, couple of dozen, hundred thousands of, I would say, infrastructure financial providers that are there to make this ecosystem stronger. And this is something where everybody has their own opinion how it's being done, but it boils down to your vision, and then your vision boils down to your business model, and then your business model boils down to your operations, and then everything gets aligned. So you start with a vision, and our vision was, let's bring users what they need. What they need. They need interoperability, seamless integration. They want to do it with low amount of risk for them. They want a simple user interface with seamless user experience, and they want revenue. So if you want to bring these four things to the users, you need to deal with the other risks, and that means you need to be aware of what you're trying to achieve. And by doing that, you're improving, and you're trying to, you're being customer centric, and you need to stay oriented that way. So that's why, for example, for the biggest customers lately, we are conducting a partner survey where we are seeing how they think about us, and then how their users of the distribution channels are thinking about us. And we are using this information as a feedback loop to improve and go further in our, I would say, steps towards making near intents better.
Right. And it's kind of like how you said the user or market maker is always right. You're actually getting that customer or user feedback to find ways to continually improve the product. So you're not just solving for problems that may or may not exist for your users, but you're solving for real ones that they're actually thinking of that would make the product even better. And I think that that's just great. And that kind of leads a little bit into my next question. Looking at near intents a little bit beyond just the financial component, we often talk about building bridges between assets, but what about building bridges between people? How do you think of near intents as a relational layer, not just a financial one?
Well, that's also kind of happening within the wider near protocol ecosystem, where near intents is only part of it. And basically, a lot of people coming to the groups, following on Twitter, being interactive. What we see, for example, is that around 5 to 6% of the followers are actually interacting on Twitter on a daily basis. So this proves that people are engaging, and that they're giving their own opinion, and that they see the value in being tied to this kind of product. And internally within near ecosystem, also all the knowledge, all the, I would say, vision orientations, all the discussions about the future are happening also between the people who have meaning within the ecosystem. And we're talking about the ecosystem that exists for a few years, that has been the first one paving the road towards the AI, that has been the first who has utilized certain, I would say, user experience level improvements of the chain in order to make operations more seamless and more simple for the users. So basically, we see that this ecosystem is still existing, that's building good products, that's trying to bring something new to the table. And if you have this innovation loop, and you're thinking about innovation management by building the hypothesis and testing it and trying to bring something new to the users and seeing how it works, basically that's something that creates innovation. And innovation is something that everybody is striving for. And right now it's all about simplicity and making blockchains become an infrastructure, basically. While in the future, as you, for example, have, I would say, roads inside of a single country, and then you have like borders and bridges to other countries. You're also kind of doing that with the blockchains. All of them are going to be connected. Some of them with some high-level infrastructure, some of them with low-level cryptographic primitive data exchange concepts that are fast, secure, and scalable. And that's it.
No, I love it. And, for me personally, that resonates as well, because that's a big part of my life is, basically enabling people or showing people the benefits of like a borderless life, and being able to not just cross borders in terms of countries, but also cross borders in terms of assets, in terms of people, right? And to make those connections that you need to make to have your life be meaningful. And I think that the products and projects that we work with, the teams that we support, can be an integral part of that we don't always think about, which, I would ask for you personally, how do you connect on either a spiritual or emotional level to the work that you do with Near Intense? Would you say that this project represents something more than just code and capital?
Well, when I reached Near, or was invited to actually work on Near Intense, at the beginning, all of the trade-offs were presented by the management on a calls with me, and I somehow saw that there is a willingness to solve these, I would say, challenges, or to find the ways how to bring the solutions that are the best out there, and that some of the solutions are not known, some of them are known, some of them are maybe not defined in a proper way, but there is willingness towards innovation. And I would say that innovation is one of the values I thrive. Secondly, when seeing the way how Near blockchain works, and having the sense of the sharding infrastructure, or I would say the shards within the Near ecosystem, which is also a concept that's been known for at least 7-8 years in the blockchain world. Basically, thinking about the decentralization of the systems and seeing how, at that point, Verifier, now Intense.Near, was written as a smart contract, I saw that decentralization as a concept plays a significant role, and basically that everybody sees these things now as beneficial. So apart from innovation, I would add decentralization, and finally, trust. Everybody that's working on this product comes out their own face with their own first and last name and say, we're behind it, we're there. As I like to say, we are here, we are near. And basically, everybody comes with their own name, without nicknames, without hidden identities, and they're creating trust. As we are talking right now together about this, basically, I see innovation, decentralization, and trust as, I would say, my own beliefs and maybe the value system that I thrive for. And I see that with everybody within the Near ecosystem connected to the Near Foundation. And that's the reason why I'm here. Underlying values are matching.
I love that. No, that's a really great answer, and it really like explains to me, or highlights, I guess, a parallel that I see with myself, to where like when I first got into the space during DeFi summer, and I was a completely different person back then, like politically, like actually in so many other ways, to see like what just a diverse group of people all around the world can build together, using decentralization and what I view as free market principles, really transformed me and had an impact on me and the kind of relationships that I wanted to have, not just in the space, but with people I meet who know nothing about crypto or decentralized finance. It was very transformative to me, and I do continue to see how those types of values of things like decentralization or trusts or building something to be trustless, right? Where somebody doesn't need to give up their private keys or access to something secure on their end for you to be able to provide value to them. Um, you know, Giving without the expectation of return as well, and seeing how many ways that's played its way out in a world where you would think would just be built on incentives. It's amazing how the actual people in this space give and give and give with no expectation of return. It just shows a deeper emotional or spiritual, however you want to view it, commitment to what we're building in this space and why we do it. So thank you very much for sharing that. In a time when builders feel so burnt out or disconnected, feeling the opposite of exactly what we're talking about here. And you can be working on a great project. You can be working on something you love and still feel burned out or disconnected. I've had those moments myself. What would you say keeps you grounded and passionate? It could be with Mirror Intense. It could be with any of the projects you work on.
Well, basically the ability to contribute and the ability to have autonomy and to influence decision making, thinking about the ways how new ideas are coming to life, doing ideation, being involved into something that's meaningful. So basically, however you describe the motivation, that's a personal thing in general, but everybody has its own ways how they get motivated about things. So in general, I would say the ability to learn and apply what's learned and do it in a way which suits the needs of the people around you, and that of course involves users, customers, however you call them. In general, that's something that is most important aspect, which I think for majority of people is kind of similar.
No, I agree completely. Bringing it back to Stellar, right? So as Stellar explores new protocols like Protocol 23 and deeper DeFi integrations with Sorbonne, how do you see Near Intense potentially collaborating or integrating going into the future?
Well, as you could see, when we talked about representation of Stellar within the DeFi world at the beginning, there were a couple of grand of daily transactions. Now we're reaching up a couple of hundred grand of daily transactions. There are a couple of market making incentives or initiatives, I would say, in general, happening on the intersection of Stellar with Near. And a lot of these are happening in general. So, for example, the way how memos work on Near Intense is basically a thing that where we've created it in a way to be suitable towards Stellar users. Also, similarly with XRP, which also uses memos. So we're focusing on bringing these kinds of functionalities to the Stellar ecosystem to be as frictionless as possible for them. While some of the improvements happening, as you mentioned, with the Sorbonne and going towards the DeFi aspect, this is something that it's not fully covered within Near yet. We have some experimental features, which you can see on one-click swap, but we're also paying attention towards integrating these so that, for example, on a destination, you don't just get some funds, but also on destination, you can execute a smart contract call. So this is something that would bring a lot of value to the chains that are enabling DeFi functionalities through smart contracts, because sometimes a destination can be an address, but sometimes it can be a contract that's behind the address where you need to execute some kind of logic in order for whole, I would say, transaction to be, as we've said, atomic or undivisible or frictionless and so on.
And have that finality we talked about as well, in terms of predictive fulfillment and everything. My next question touches on that, and you kind of answered it mostly. I mean, unless there's anything else you want to share in terms of discussions or experiments that are in motion to bring intense architecture to the Stellar chain or its partners. Is there anything else you want to share in that regard?
Well, basically, as I've said, market making, then also some distribution channels wanting to have Stellar fully, I would say, advertised on their websites or front ends that are built on top of near intents. And there are also some discussions, for example, about using different information sources about the on-chain information that's coming from the Stellar chain. So in general, there are ways where, for example, currently there are reasons why we have gone 100x on the volume on a daily level with the XLM.
Gotcha. And bringing it back to, I guess I'd say, the future of near intents, right? In the next 5 years, what do you see a successful future looking like for near intents? It doesn't have to be just in terms of TVL, total value locked. It could also be like in terms of human outcomes. What does that future look like to you?
Well, TVL in general is not a good metric for, I would say, the cross-chain swapping concept. In general, it's a volume thing. But
right. That's it.
Yeah, but in general, when we're talking about the future, if chains are infrastructure and they're connected, you have chain abstraction, you have more simplistic interface in the form of API, which you can consume. Right now, we've created it in a way that it's consumed by the AI agents. Having AI as, I would say, not just a hype, but a thing that stays, especially generative AI, that basically has disrupted a lot of things going on right now, not just within the crypto industry, but within many industries. I see near intents as a layer where you can plug in your AI agent, and then it can have the access towards the holistic blockchain infrastructure to not just execute cross-chain swaps, but do much more. And that's what we call intents. Hey, do me a yield claim on this smart contract using this key every 7 days, take that money, stake it into this protocol, and then do restaking here. And then when you get to this figure, pay that out on my bank account and wire that to my wife.
I love that. I just love how far we can potentially take this going into the future. And, with AI constantly just blowing our minds every year with the new things it's able to do, it constantly iterating on itself. We have whole discussions on this on Bitcoin Live DB and, deorganized media as well. They're always talking about things like the future of AI, not just some of the tangible things that we can literally prove, but some of the pretty out there stuff as well, but always with brilliant minds behind it. So, I mean, it's really interesting to think with really technical, experienced people like yourself and others working on the AI component as well to actually fulfill different kinds of operations based on certain outcomes. It's really cool to kind of think about what the future might look like for near intents and what you guys can actually enable. But basically, with that said, I mean, we'll go ahead and kind of close out with just a couple final questions that I had for you. I guess I just would start by asking, what's one connection you made, maybe unexpected, maybe deeply personal, that reminded you of why you're building this?
Well, we've kind of touch that with innovation, decentralization, and trust. And in general, when I think about the way scoutings are functioning within the ecosystem, I see the value in the openness and basically in transparency. So you see, if it's decentralized, it doesn't necessarily have to be transparent. And I see the value in transparency between the people and between the chains. And basically, that is an underlying value which, on a daily level, we see within the whole ecosystem. And I would say, whole industry is kind of going towards this way. For example, in the enterprise, for a lot of, I would say, years, spanning from having the mainstream like blowout of Bitcoin roughly in 2012 and 2013, we've seen the permissioned, non-transparent chains being the primary value brought to them, to the enterprise. And right now, everybody's talking about public chains without like a secrecy level encryption. No, everything fully transparent on chain. Everybody can see everything. So this is something where transparency comes, and I would say that that's something that everybody in this industry should understand and have as a value, as a mantra, as a concept, as a high level non-functional requirement.
I love it, and I love what you say too about with decentralized structures, right? You have kind of like this less reliance on maybe trusting a person or something. You're trusting the code, right? And this was like a big part of my identity when I came into the space. And you see this with other creators as well, where like they were just a JPEG for the longest time, and you didn't know if they were a man, woman, child, or baby who's giving you this information. But you would actually judge what they said based on the merit of what they were saying. You could look at the code of the contracts they'd written or the projects that they had supported, the white papers, and you'd kind of come to your conclusions about whether to trust these people or not. But another level of that as well does come into the transparency with identity, right? Which is why I like chose to dox myself. And then you have other individuals. I think a good example is like Alex Finn, I believe, NFT God, but like he came out public as well with his identity, and he'd been somebody who had like helped people for years, and now he's like doing some more like mainstream stuff as well outside just NFTs, right? But it's like a whole nother layer of trust and connection. And I think what shows tremendous growth about this space for me particularly is that there isn't, like I felt at least during the periods of DeFi summer when we had all this rush of capital coming into the space and these tokens getting issued left and right, and people were becoming millionaires overnight, becoming bankrupt overnight. You had scammers left and right, but also really like beautiful, amazing people that were creating these incredible like protocols and projects. It's really great to see how the space has matured to where it even feels safe to come out and be public about who you are and what you support. And that we have like, processes in place to actually trade crypto and be able to make some gains and, be successful in doing so without being punished in some legal or tax or restrictive way, that there's actually like systems in place to enable us to do this. And I just think that that's really great. And I guess that would just lead to my final question would just be with regards to near intents. If you had to summarize the role of near intents in this greater ecosystem, just in a single sentence to summarize it, what would you say? What would you say that would be?
Well, I would say that near intents is a seamless cross-chain liquidity layer for the future of financial transactions.
I love that. Well, I appreciate you sharing all this with me, Dejan. It's been wonderful, as it always is, to speak to you. I'm looking forward to an opportunity to speak to you again in the future, maybe about like how much bigger Near Intense is at this time next year. Who knows? You'll be doing, instead of just billions in volume, it'll be billions of users, right? Everyone on the planet will be using Near Intense. We'll see. Who knows what's possible with what you guys are building and the incredible team behind what you're doing. So thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you as well. And all of the questions were really good. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Of course. Take care.